Welcome everybody to another episode of Don't Panic Geocacher. My name is Arjen and I go by WaterFan5 on the geocaching.com website. This episode is about the Olympic Ring series, a series of mystery geocaches, puzzles that I put out for the Bamarama Mega-Event that was held in February 2026. It was a series of 6 mystery caches that started relatively easy and then went harder as more of them published, with a very hard final. In this episode I will explain how the puzzles worked, every detail of it, so that will help you solve it if you haven't solved it yet. If you're interested in how it was solved or how it was created, then you can learn more about it in this video. I'll tell you a lot of details about some of the aspects that went into creating this series, so hopefully that's interesting for you to watch. If you don't want to be spoiled, then I recommend solving the puzzles first and then come back and watch it and see if you maybe discover something new in what I have to tell you. With that, we'll just dive into the first ones right away. I will explain them in the order that they were published. So go by one. Probably will be pretty long as there is a lot to tell, but I hope you enjoy it. Please like and subscribe. That way it will help me, it helps promote the channel, and we can make more videos like this. So here's the first one. It is the Olympics Rings Red. It's every ring had its own geocache, and then there is a bonus at the end. That is basically what the top of the page describes. And all of these are keyword puzzles. So we're looking here for a keyword. That's always important to remember. Are we looking for coordinates or a keyword? So I'm trying to be very clear about that we're looking for a specific keyword. The cache containers also has field puzzles associated with it. I will explain those as well later on in the episode. But for now, let's just take a look at what further this is. Now, there is some additional information here. This is just the general flavor text that there will be a bonus, that each cache has a keyword in the logbook, so to make sure to write those down. This is fairly tricky because you have to remember to do that, and otherwise you have to go back or get the keywords from somebody else. And it explains that each color is associated with a continent. This is no longer the official explanation of the colors of the rings, but it worked for this puzzle series. So the whole premise of this puzzle was that each continent had a specific puzzle sport associated that they could propose to the Olympic Games. That was kind of like the gimmick of this series. So here, since this event was in southern Alabama, I used that as the area, and basically he suggests thrift shopping. For those of you familiar with the Bamarama Mega-Event, you can see this is a slight nudge to an organizer as well, or a previous organizer. So the puzzle itself, it's all around shopping. And what we see here is specific brands and logos that have to do with shops. And so as the solver, what do you have to do? You have to shop and figure out what are these logos. Most of them should be easily recognizable. I've shown you in the past some tricks of how to do that, but I will show that again. And then it mentions that if you get stuck, a large company may help you find this whole thing, because that actually will help. That large company, of course, being Google, can help you find this whole thing. And you need to answer the question, what activity do people do here? One word, only enter as spelled. Now, when I explain the mega puzzle, the bonus puzzle, you will see how it all comes together. And so I was very restrictive in the words that I can use. So this was not a randomly chosen word. This was a specific word. And so I made later on something in there to prevent people simply guessing this single word, because you could just start entering activities, right? There's a lot of activities, but it was still guessable. I didn't really care about it for this puzzle, but with the bonus I did some tricks to make sure that I knew you had solved the puzzle. So what was the puzzle? Well, recognizing these logos. And all of them you may recognize because they're pretty, I try to keep familiar logos. But basically, if you would go in order, then you would see the Emirates Airlines, Infinity, Gerber, Harley, and Target. So EIGHT, which of course then spells the number 8. This is, however, an issue because if you look at the coordinates, they would be in the 34 range. No 8 at all. Even like if you look at degrees, they don't start with an 8. This looks like it's going to be an issue. However, 8 looks pretty good, right? So you want to go on, and basically if you go to the next one, Ferrari, Instagram, Visa, and then the Expedia, then you get 5. So we have 8, 5. And so we know we're doing something right, but at some point it appears to look like garbage. And this was where several people got stuck and asked me for help as well. Because let me show you what the final result was if you solve them all. You got these text 8, 5, 8, 6, 6, and then suddenly you got some random letters. Here is the word plus, and now you get the word 6, and you get 3. And so if you now replaced the letters with actual numbers, you will get this part. Now, a lot of people stopped at this section, and that would be very hard to solve because you just have a long string. It doesn't look like coordinates. What do I do with that? Well, that's where the help came in. Like, you may ask a large company for help. Because if you had successfully converted the numbers to numbers and the plus to a plus symbol, you got this code. And this code you can actually directly dump into Google like this. And it would actually bring us to a location. This is a so-called Google Plus code. And if we go to that, so if we now click on this location, it would actually bring us somewhere on the map. And we can do that as well. It will bring us to Las Vegas. Now, you actually have to be slightly more precise than that, because if you go to Vegas, of course, there's lots of things that do in Vegas. But if you zoom in enough to this coordinate, then you would find out that you end up in Poker Run Street. And so your answer is either poker or run. I saw some people entering either because, well, both are activities. But I try to tell you in the puzzle one word, so at least you had that as something to go with. So that's how you solve the puzzle. You enter poker in the checker, and you would get the coordinates. Now, just a little bit extra. So if you wanted to do this, then the easy way, of course, I always use Google Lens. Typically, there's a little plugin available that you can use, and that will allow you to go, for example, this one. It will show up in the right way, and it will show, okay, this must be the Taco Bell, the T, and so on. So you can go over all of them, and basically, the ones that you know or don't know, it will easily recognize them, which one would come back with the right information. There was one that gave a little bit of issue because the company is technically called Mozilla. I used Firefox here. Firefox was technically, but yeah, both came up. So if some people got it with an M, simple, and contacted me and then said, no, you need an F, and then go from there. So that was this puzzle, and yeah, with that you have the first puzzle solved. Just like previous years, that was not where you needed, where this page stopped. There was more information on this page to be found. Several people actually solved this before even the event started, but none of them were at the event themselves that had solved it, because there was this weird number here at the bottom. And this weird number was going to be important later on. People recognized it, some people contacted me about it, asked me if it was important. I didn't reply. And some people said, oh, I know how to convert this. And they told me how to convert this, and so they were able to solve the next part of the puzzle. But this was the red puzzle. Let's move on to the next one. The next ring is the black ring. So if we go down, we can see that this is associated with Africa. And it talks here about a big fan of the Paris-Dakar race. This is an auto race. If you Google it, you'll find it. And it talks about that there's different routes. They will be given below. And Also that it says, oh, it would be nice if we pick up a cache in each country. This is a little bit of a help of how to solve this puzzle. Now I added the map here since the map of Africa has a habit of changing because of border disputes. So this is the map that I used, and you have to find a map with sort of similar. And then here it finds the different routes. Now this is probably the easiest puzzle of the series. If you look at it, this is a 3 difficulty. That seems fair. And what you have to do is find a map that has these countries, and with finding a geocache in the country, what would happen on the geocaching map if you find a cache in that country, it colors that country. So here is a map of Africa that is sort of similar. So you can Google just map of Africa and you will find them, and you see all the country names on here. And so now if we take these routes that are listed here, below we see 6 different routes, and it says again for the checker we need 1 word. So if we do that, so we have these, and if we go to the first route, it mentions Côte d'Azur, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, the Gambia, Senegal, and Mauritania. So if we take an empty map and start filling it in, then if you color those countries, you would get this shape. And of course, that looks like the letter C. And if you do the same one for the next one, Angola, Namibia, we can again look at the map where I are. Angola, Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and then Lesotho and East Estonia, or not East Estonia, Swatini, then you will get those countries. So those, of course, combined form the letter O. So now we have the letter C, the letter O, and if we continue doing this for the other letters, so we see here a little bit longer one, that will then be the next letter. We see here actually a very short one, that is actually these 2 short countries right here, and so that will form the letter I, and so on. So it's actually I with a dot, and so it will form the word cosmic, and that is the answer that we have. So you'll see each puzzle has a very unique word. So we had the first one, we had poker. The second one, we had mid-range. The last one has cosmic. That again, I got somebody contacting me online and saying like, hey, those don't seem like random words. And they actually guessed what the solution was going to be for the bonus, or at least the approach what was going to be for the bonus. Again, similar here, we have this one. This will give us to a unique word as well. So now we actually have 2 words on the page, right? We have this answer, 1 word 1. We have this word, that is word number 2, which we don't know yet how to do. I'll explain that later. And as I mentioned earlier on, each cache container has a field puzzle. You have to solve it, but also there is a keyword inside in the logbook. So now we have 3 words. Every cache page has 3 words. What could that be? As mentioned, the puzzles would get slightly harder. So we're going here to Olympic Links yellow. And same introduction text, but now yellow stands for Asia. And again here there's a little bit of introduction text. Reading is important, so because there might always be hints in there. So it mentions here the representative from Asia was named Hashi. This is important. Suggested that the Kashi's Castle, that was a TV show, should be an Olympic event. And then he starts to explain a game with a system of islands connected with single and double straight bridges. Sounds fun. That's all I'm giving you here. So because Hashi is actually a logic type puzzle, if you search this word in Google, you will find that this is a specific type of logic puzzle. And in this logic puzzle, you have to figure out where the single and the double straight bridges are. So here is a map of the island. The numbers indicate the number of bridges for each island. Maybe you can find out where the bridges are supposed to be. So that means that this is the logic puzzle and you have to find out the specific bridges. Now if you do that, so how do you start a puzzle like this? I have a specific video that I talk about puzzles like this. But you look for the ones that have like either a maximum scenario. So for example, 4, each one maximum has a double, means that this one needs to be a double and this one needs to be a double. So that is a specific scenario where we immediately now have lines filled in. And there's other scenarios like that as well, where you can find immediate restrictions where every direction is already kind of filled in of what you need to do or excluded because of what you need to do. So if you do that, and I will show here the solution to this puzzle. So you will get a system like this, where you see all the islands are now connected. So this one has 1, this one has 2. You will see this one has 4 bridges, this one has 4, etc., etc. And so now, how do you read words from this? That was the whole trick, because at the end you needed to have a keyword, right? It says you had to have a keyword. So the trick was that the single and the double lines actually here were important. So if you looked at the single lines, then we see that here the letter W, and some people recognized one word. They said like, oh, I see the word force. F-O-R-C-E. But they couldn't see the other word. Some people saw the word work, and so but didn't. So W-O-R-K. So basically you had to separate the single and the double lines, and if you did that, you got the word workforce, which was the solution to the puzzle. So that was the checker that all that you needed. So the trick was to figure out the correct clue, Hashi, in case you weren't familiar with it. I explained a little bit about the rules, so even if you weren't familiar with it, maybe you would be able to solve it. And then at the end, the trick of being able to visually read from the solution the keyword that was needed. Just like the other ones, there's an extra word here that you could derive from this number. So that would give you the 4th puzzle solved. So we see here we now have 4 continents done, and so now we're going to the last one and the bonus puzzle. So now we are at green, and as mentioned, it will get harder, and so this was the last one of the standard rings before the bonus. If we read the text, green is for Europe, and again there's several hints in here. Root and Dirk is a hint in here that stands for what we need to do later. Also, we talk about bar games, and especially European bar games. So here was the majority of the puzzle, and the key was to get what is the person carrying. Again, we're looking for one word. All the other ones were one word. I didn't specifically tell you that. It was also guessable because it wasn't the hardest word in the world. But that was not a concern because the bonus had extra protection to make sure somebody had solved it. So let's take a look at how to solve this. Now, there's 2 puzzles in here. One is the outside letters, the other one is the inside. But the first thing that you have to realize is, what are you looking at here? And that is actually a dartboard. So if we overlay the 2, then we see that a dartboard nicely aligns with the grid. And so now all these sections correspond with a number. This is important for both solving the text as well as the circles, the balls that we need to look at. Because if we see where it lines up, we see that the low numbers all have balls located, but then the high numbers do not. 20, 17, 19, 16, 18, they all don't have numbers lined up. So the numbers stop at the end. So with 13 being the last or one to have a number. There's also a gap at 6. This all will become important. But first let's take a look at the text and how to decode the text. So here's again the dartboard, and at number 1 it says FFO. So if we take FFO and we have the number 1, the trick that you had to do here is that the 1 and the text combined were important. Well, the easiest thing or the default thing to try is by simply doing a rotation cipher. So we rotate the alphabet by 1 and now see what happens with the letters F, F, O. The F would become an E, the O would become an N. So we would get this. That doesn't look too great. Let's take a look at the number 2. 2 has EQQ. Now, of course, 2 we would have to rotate 2. And I say of course, but that is of course the puzzle that you had to figure out, that the rotation cipher varies with the text. That was the trick of the puzzle. So EQQ now rotated by 2 would give you the letters C, and then the Q would be QOO. Well, that looks like more like something that we could use because, for example, the word coordinate starts with COO. So that looks promising. So let's take a look at 3, UGL. We now, of course, have to rotate one more. So we'll take the C and rotate them to the end. U would become an R. So that looks good. G would become a D. And the I would become, the L would become an I. So that looks good, like the word coordinate, right? So we can do that for the entire text, and if you do that and don't make any mistakes, you actually get this text out of it. So that is actually a Dutch text. It already mentioned it was European, and it says here: een coördinatensysteem voor Nederland is het Rijksdriehoeksstelsel, or in English, a coordinate system for the Netherlands is the Rijksdriehoek system. So this basically indicates what we're looking at the inside. This is the Rijksdriehoek system. So what is that? Well, that is a coordinate system, and if you Google that, you'll find, for example, that Geocaching Toolbox supports that. So if we take this again away, we can go to Geocaching Toolbox, Dutch coordinate system, and we can see here the Rijksdriehoek coordinate system, or also RD. Remember root and dirk, the RD coordinates. So even without solving the text, you would have another way to do that. And you see here we need 2 sets of numbers with a break in the middle. Well, we already had seen we had a break in the middle, so that's going to work out quite nicely. So the next thing that we need to do is figure out, okay, what do we do with those circles, right? Well, I already told you they're actually balls, European sport. If you look at a European bar sport, you should quickly get to the snooker one. And they have exactly the colors used in the picture. Red is 1, yellow is 2, green is 3, brown is 4, pink is 5, pink is 6, black is 7. Going back to our picture, if we now start again at 1, we have red is 1, black is 7. We need, as we know, 14 numbers or 30 numbers, so we see that that would nicely work because the numbers stop at a certain point. So let's do this. So 1 plus 7 is 8, so the first one is 8. The next one is a white one, so that would be a 0. The next one would be 1 and 3, that is combined 4. Because we can't use them combined, we would get way too many numbers for the coordinate system that we're using. So that means that if we do the math, we get for these numbers, and we get the 12 that we need, the first part and the second part. So if we do everything, we get these set of numbers, 8, 0, 4, 2, 2, and then 4, 5 for the second part. We can put that in the Geocaching Toolbox site. There's other sites that do it, but they should all give a very similar coordinate. So if we go in here and convert, we get a coordinate in the Netherlands. Now remember, the question was, what is the person carrying? So hopefully at this location somebody is carrying something. And we see that we end up in the middle of a square. So that looks pretty good. Let's take this coordinate and let's go to Google Maps. And go to these coordinates and let's see what we find there. at this location, see the same square, use Street View, and we find a little statue there. Zooming in on the statue will tell you that there is a woman sitting there and she's carrying an apple. An apple is the answer to the puzzle that you need to do here. And that solves the green puzzle. So the next one was blue. So in the blue one, same introduction text, and it talks about that this is for Oceania, so Australia, New Zealand area. And again, we're talking about a new sport here for the Olympics. Specifically referencing Australia here, that might help you solve the puzzle. And there's several keywords in here as well that always good to read this text and see if you see anything that looks important. So for example, here I talk order to make this puzzle. And similar thing, here's a crossword puzzle. Hope you can sort it all out. Order and sort are basically some keywords here that kind of give you a clue. And then it gives you a crossword puzzle. Now, the descriptions here below tell you about what you should fill in the crossword puzzle, and it has these weird odds here as well, almost like betting odds. One says no odds. It's all weird, right? So definitely tricked people here. Most people got to the first part, and that is what these things are. If you Google these locations, you will quickly find out that these are locations of Australian football teams. So that's what you have to fill in the puzzle. You basically have to fill in the location of the Australian football teams, and now you get to the odds part, where it says, okay, fill this in. So if you do that, and let me pull that up with the information. So right here, this is the answer. So you see that all the nicknames of those teams, they fit nicely into the puzzle, but now what you need to do with that. And that's where those odds came in. Because if you look at these scores and you actually just do simple math with differences, right? And I sort of made it tricky that I didn't always put the highest number in front. But if you do that, then this one has a difference of 3, this one has a difference of 4, this one has a difference of 2, this one has a difference of 5, etc. The other thing that you may notice is that these don't go exactly in order. So these numbers all go from 1, 4, 6, but these do not. At some point it's 8 is before 7. So purposely this is kind of like a match up. And if you look in the puzzle, 8 and 9, they actually get together right here at the letter A. Similar like 15 and 13. So 15 and 13, they come together in the puzzle. So 15 and 13 here, they meet up at the letter N. So that means that you could get for each of them, you could extract a certain letter exactly where the matchup was in the puzzle. And then what you get to do is using the order, and one of them says 0, that matchup was not important. You now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and if you put that word in order, you get the word M, I, D, R, A, and G. The word answer to this puzzle being mid-range, and that's how you solve this puzzle. Similar like the other one, at the end, if you looked at the image, it had a specific number here associated. That number at the end for the bonus will be important. But other than that, this was a relatively quick solve. If you solve the crossword, if you realize that this was a matchup between in the crossword, and then with this the order, and even if you didn't realize that, it was a simple anagram of the letters, but you would have to realize that the no odds, you would have a letter too many. So if you didn't completely figure this out, it wouldn't work. So that kind of forced you to solve this part of the puzzle to get the full coordinates. And then we have the final. So the final, there's lots of text. So first of all, it says you have to find all the other caches in the series, but also have solved them. And actually the checker asks you 2 answers. So you see there's only 19 solves on it. Because it asks you related questions. I showed you earlier that the first one was red, was ended up in Las Vegas. It asks you to end up Las Vegas. So if you just had the keyword poker, you couldn't get past this checker. The same with the keyword that puzzle that had apple. You need to answer the name of the square. If you didn't have the name of the square, you couldn't get past this checker. So that was kind of like an extra verification step. But it says that this part had you need a set of keywords and that there is 3 sets of keywords. So it says congratulations, hope you have solved it. That is your first set of keywords, the 5 answers to the 5 puzzles. And also it says I hope you have found it, because on each cache page it said you get a keyword from finding it. There's a keyword in the container. But there's a third set of keywords. Similar like last year, I had a third set of keywords on the original cache pages that you would have found. And I added here pretty quick that it was something geocaching related. So if we go back to the other cache pages, then for example the green one had a puzzle, had one itself, so that was the word apple. Then if you went into the container, you get a third keyword. And I already pointed out that this number was important. Similar with here, it tells you if you haven't found it yet, then maybe you missed something important geocaching related. And if you go down on this page, it will actually say the word important right here as an additional hint. So here with the image, it has the word important. Similar with the other pages, you had this number. What is this number? What do you do with it? Well, the hint was it is geocaching related. That was really all that it was. So, however, what you need to do or know is that this is a specific technique to convert this ID to a GC code. Several of my videos I talk about this approach, that this is a common technique that is often utilized. So if you watch my videos, you kind of had this technique hopefully mastered. But if not, you learn something new with this cache. Because if you go to the geocaching toolkit and typed in this number, ID to GC code, you get a GC code. And similar for the other ones, you get a single cache coordinate if you looked up that specific cache. So then you would find, for example, one of them gave this cache coordinate, you would find the word metro. And another one would give the word legs. So they all gave one specific word, so now we have 3 sets of words. So now let's take a look again at the puzzle on this page, now that we have all the words that we need to solve this puzzle. So on this cache page was this Olympic circles that all had 19 rings on it, and there was a little dash if you paid close attention, indicating something important. Now, what I hadn't said is that it had to be clockwise, but most people seem to assume that correctly. But what you have to do is utilize those words and put them in those circles. So I mentioned the first 2 were straightforward. So you had for blue, yellow, black, green and red. You had the words from the puzzle, you had the words from the cache locations, and then with the GC codes, you get the final set of words. All of these are 19 long, so now it is a matter of fitting them into this image. They actually fit in 2 ways, but there's only one correct solution. So if you do that, you will get this puzzle. They're not necessarily going to the order, so you kind of had to mix and match the order. That was the real puzzling, but you see the overlapping letters exactly fit. So mid-range, metro, spool, workforce, and then where are the other words? Legs and reason is the second one, and so on for each circle. I could have made it a lot more difficult by mixing all the words together, but I actually left the blue words with blue and left the yellow words with yellow, etc. I considered at some point mixing all the words together, so you had to figure out which word goes where. And you may even have solved it that way, not realizing that the words actually nicely go with each ring. But now if you do that, you have the correct order of each word. Is it completely necessary? It makes life easier because realistically this is all that you needed, is you needed to know the 3 words and put them in some kind of order. Because why were these words so tricky and why were they so different? Because they were what 3 word locations. Because the puzzle asks you, and I haven't shown you that yet, is what are the locations, what are the sports played at these locations. So we know that we have to do that. Let me show you that part next. So back to the puzzle page. We have the specific words now. We know the order. We've placed them in the rings. And the final part is that it says, put the sports names together. So somehow from these rings we need to get sports names. Well, as I mentioned, the answer to that is the what 3 words scenario. So if we take, for example, the first 3 combinations and we put that in what 3 words, then we'll see that this is a rowing club in this continent. So that's why there's only one location. If you put the words out of order, you wouldn't end up in the correct continent. So this is a specific location in North America. And so there is a rowing scenario. Similar with the other ones, if we go to the second one and go there, then we would get another location. And if we zoom in, this used to be a gymnastics, but it is a fencing hall now, so I actually had to change the puzzle slightly. And so this is a fencing location, and so on. So all 5 locations go to a specific sport, allowing you to solve the final puzzle. So that would solve all the combination of puzzles that would now get you location. Each of them also had a field puzzle. I will explain that part next. A little bit about background of creating this puzzle, because this was truly insane. Because I started with the rings puzzle and I thought, oh, that would be a good idea, right? So here is the little Google Sheets document with the ring puzzle with all the different words. However, I had to find locations of 1 3 words that were exactly 19 long that would fit nicely together in one unique solution. So there couldn't be more than one solution. And then when I had the words, I had to make sure that I made a puzzle with one of these words as well. So I had to make a puzzle where the answer was apple, where the answer was poker, where the answer was cosmic, workforce. Now some of the puzzles was very generic, like cosmic I could use any word as long as it was a short word. But workforce had to be that specific Hashi logic puzzle. Apple, I had to find a puzzle where apple was the answer, same with poker. So that was quite tricky by itself, same with mid-range. I had to make a puzzle where the mid-range was the answer. It could be any of these words, of course. I had a choice of 3, but there was another problem. I had to use the GC code and I had to make sure that there was a geocache that would match with another word. So I had to make sure that there was a geocache. So needless to say, I had thousands of locations that scanned to make sure that I had a puzzle, a location that ended up at a sport that was 19 characters long combined, and where I could make puzzles with all of them. So there was lots of different variants I had to test, where some of them didn't have a GC, some of them had no words that would end up with a good puzzle option. So yeah, this was a lot of work. I probably would never do it like that again, but just a little bit about background of how complicated you can make it yourself when making a puzzle. So one more part of this puzzle, all the puzzles also had field puzzles on it, thanks to the women of Bamarama who did a lot of the decorations and things like that. All of them had a specific field puzzle. So this was on the container that was yellow, Asia. It had the characters on it, and that was basically the combination lock. Europe again was the trickiest. So here you had all these flags, and what you had to discover is that some of these flags are not flags of countries, but are actually numbers. So these are actually a number code right here in the middle. So those are spell out a combination, the rest are country flags. Next one is a map of Africa. It says here Addis, and it has a little dot, bit hard to see, but the capital of Addis is Ababa, which then is ABABA 12121. That was the code. This one had a postcard on it. The ammo can look slightly different, but same principle. And the postcard was missing a zip code. The zip code for this address was the code. And the last one had the word Aussie. If you know us, we always travel with our dog Aussie. It is slightly spelled different. But the joke here is that in Australia, everything is always upside down. So if you turned it upside down, you would get 31220. And that was the code for the finals. So those were the field puzzles associated with each one to open up the combination locks. So that's the end of this video. As you could see, there was a lot of work in solving all these puzzles, so I appreciate all the time that people spent solving it, contacting me if they got stuck. I hope that people had fun solving it. I know a lot of people did. I got a lot of feedback on it while I was there. I'm already thinking about how to do the puzzles next year. I will definitely use some of the same concepts I did this year, of a bonus puzzle, some puzzles, some hidden things on cache pages, so beware to look out for that. If you've never been to Bamarama, I highly recommend it. It's really a cacher's mega event. There's lots of caches hidden, geo art, power trails, challenge trails, traditionals, easy puzzles, hard puzzles, tree climbing, anything that you could ask for, you will find it at Bamarama. So I highly recommend you attending. It's a great event. We typically attend for multiple days, but it goes as long as I think 9 or 10 days total, and some people spend that whole time there. There's certainly enough caches to find. If you would like to contact me, Waterfan5 on the geocaching.com website is the easiest way. You can also reach me by email. Email is here on the page. With that, thank you very much for listening. If you listened all the way, please like and subscribe if you haven't. I appreciate that. That way I know that you appreciate the videos. And with that, hope to see you in the next video.